what the audience is most concerned about, even though they don't know it consciously, is they want to see that character grow by the end of the story. And what that means is fulfilling that need, that something that's missing inside that's so deep that it's hurting their life. And if the audience can see that growth, then they will be satisfied, even if the hero doesn't accomplish the goal that they set for themselves.
The next section in our character development workshop is the concept of weakness. I think the most interesting concept I've learned about weakness is from John Truby. He describes a weakness as a need, and there are two types, psychological and moral. A psychological need is a weakness that only affects the hero and no one else. A moral need is a weakness that immorally hurts the characters surrounding the hero. It is best that the hero has both a moral weakness and a psychological weakness. But Truby goes on to say that any psychological weakness can be developed to become a moral need as well. And I believe that taking a psychological need and elaborating on it to become a moral need is an important technique to integrate into your character development. My complaint about most stories, however, is that the characters almost always have a certain type of weakness, when there are so many other weaknesses that are rarely used and explored. I'm going to list two groups consisting of weaknesses, and I want you to think which group is the one you almost always see in stories. Group 1, sloth, apathy, gluttony, naivety, vanity. Group 2, prejudice, impatience, greed, pride, dishonesty. Obviously it's group 2, but why is that? Let's elaborate on these weaknesses a little further, and maybe a pattern will emerge. Group 1, I don't want to. I don't care. I am always eating. I don't know. I admire myself. In group 2, you are dirty. This person is slow. I want his life. I am better than you. I lied to him. Did you notice a pattern? The reason why you see group 2 so much in stories is because they are the weaknesses that need others to exist to be weaknesses. For example, if your character is overly proud, but he doesn't encounter anyone else in the story, then the weakness doesn't end up harming anybody. Group 1 contains weaknesses that are turned inwards. They only harm the hero himself. Group 2 contains weaknesses that are turned outwards. They require other characters to exist. Group 2 weaknesses intrinsically harm other characters, but they can be reflected negatively to hurt the hero as well. Let's elaborate on how a Group 2 weakness can harm the hero. If we continue with the previous example, if your hero is overly proud, and there are other characters to be harmed by this weakness, the main character may be harmed as well by being viewed negatively by the other characters. The advantage with choosing a Group 2 weakness is that it's very easy to create a moral and psychological need for our character, and this in turn yields good characters. This is why Group 2 is very common in stories. This might lead you to believe that Group 1 weaknesses are bad to choose, but I don't believe this is true. Any weakness can be elaborated in such a way to hurt others. So when a weakness is internal, it doesn't mean it's a bad weakness. It just means it's a weakness that needs to be fleshed out more. To me, Group 1 weaknesses are an entire realm of possible story ideas that could be told that no one chooses to tell. Let's look at the Group 1 list again and see examples on how they can be developed to become moral needs, and not just psychological needs. I don't want to can be fleshed out to become I don't want to help you. I don't care to do something with you. I am always eating instead of being with you. I'm not sure. I don't know enough to help you. I admire myself. I admire myself where no one else can compare. You can try this for yourself. This isn't the only way these weaknesses can be developed. These Group 1 weaknesses can be fleshed out in several unique ways to become weaknesses that manifest themselves into stronger weaknesses. Weaknesses that will hurt other characters in your story instead of only your hero. One last point, make sure that these immoral actions your protagonist makes are against your other main characters, or perhaps against somewhat main characters. If your audience doesn't care about the characters that are being harmed, the weakness won't feel as strong. Your protagonist can hurt minor characters too, but make sure at least one other major character is harmed by your protagonist's weakness. In this section, I'm going to go over 4 different movies instead of just 2. Because when it comes to weaknesses, there are 3 ways to screw it up, and only one way to get it right. This time, I'm going to start with the 3 bad examples, and end with the right way to implement weakness in your characters. I'm also going to stick to goofball comedies here, because these are the types of movies that usually don't implement character weakness as well. This is mostly because goofball comedies can't implement the strong, compelling weakness in the protagonist while remaining lighthearted. So the first way to screw up character weakness is to choose to have none at all, like the movie 50 First Dates. In this movie, we have Henry, who falls in love with a girl named Lucy, whose memory resets every day. Henry in this movie is a very flat character, who has no psychological or moral weakness in the story. Because Lucy is the love interest, she is the opponent in the movie. Lucy in the story should have to force Henry to overcome his weaknesses to achieve his goal of being with Lucy. However, she can't attack Henry's weakness because none are presented to us. Because there is no weakness, the characters don't develop, and unfortunately you don't really care about these characters.
Hello?
Hey, Peter?
Sarah?
No. It's Rachel Jansen from the front desk.
Hey.
Hey, what's going on up there? You getting complaints about a woman crying hysterically?
Yeah, you know what? I hear her too, and it sounds like she's having such a hard time. I think it's coming from the floor above me.
You're on the top floor.
I'll try to keep it down.
The second way to screw up character weakness is to develop a weakness that is only fleshed out psychologically, but never morally. This occurs in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. The hero in this story is Peter, who has a pretty common weakness in comedy movies, which is a lack of self-respect. This weakness influences Peter to admire and love his ex-girlfriend Sarah, despite her not being a respectful or appreciative companion for Peter. He only realizes this through Mila Kunis's character Rachel, who helps him understand the dynamics of a healthy relationship. Notice that this weakness is a Group 1 weakness that is inherently turned inwards towards the character. If executed well, this weakness could have been fleshed out more to hurt the other characters, without becoming too heavy for a light comedy. For example, with Peter's lack of self-respect, he could have fallen back in love with Sarah, therefore damaging his relationship with Rachel, before coming to the realization that Sarah was not a good partner, overcoming his weakness by leaving Sarah and finally choosing Rachel. Note that something close to this actually does occur in the movie. However, the hurt that Peter causes Rachel is driven more from a lack of understanding rather than the hurt being directly driven from Peter's weaknesses. We see some good character development in Peter in the context of an enjoyable film, but the weakness could have been taken to a moral level to deepen his character further. Here we're going to take the weakness to the complete other direction, where the main character has a psychological and a moral need, but it's taken so dramatically and so strongly that it comes off heavy-handed, and it is preachy to the audience. This is the third way to screw up character weakness, and we'll be looking at Liar Liar. Liar Liar is pretty clever in the sense with Fletcher's weakness of being a habitual liar, because his weakness that hurts the people he loves the most is also enabled intrinsically through his career of choosing to be a lawyer who plays dirty. Fletcher has a strong embedded weakness, but it's forced on us in such a strong and obvious way that it becomes too preachy, and it feels as though we are getting a lecture from our parents or watching a children's show. It also gets pretty heavy for a comedy where Fletcher goes so far as to chase his wife and son on a tarmac after their airplane. It makes a dramatic show of apologizing for his dishonesty. So we covered the 3 ways that character weaknesses can be screwed up, and we used goofball comedies because they so rarely get this right. It's difficult though because comedies aren't necessarily pressured to have profound character development, and they risk getting too heavy to bring the mood of the story down. My pick for a movie that does do this right though is School of Rock.
Okay, who's Who's got food in here?
Our main character, Dewey, has a pretty general weakness: selfishness. He only looks out for himself and has no sense of responsibility. And this weakness extends outwards. He hurts the reputation of his band, he stresses his friend Ned out by not paying rent, and he is spiteful to Ned's girlfriend. He even goes so far as to steal Ned's prospect for employment and risk tarnishing Ned's reputation as a teacher. If that wasn't enough, he exploits the talents of children for his own self-gain. However, Dewey still does all these hurtful things, and the movie remains lighthearted and enjoyable as a comedy.
Here's the deal. I've got a hangover. Who knows what that means?
Doesn't that mean you're drunk?
No. It means I was drunk yesterday.
But through him teaching the children how to play rock and roll, he learns rock isn't something to be selfish with and hold on to for yourself, but that music is meant to be shared and enjoyed by everyone. And Dewey learns this message through great character development, but it accomplishes this without plainly stating Dewey's weakness or what the moral argument of the movie is. We are able to pick up these lessons that are embedded within the story on our own. Now let's apply character weakness to your story. When you develop a weakness for your character, consider the following. Think about what the weakness is for your character. Is it internal, or will it inherently cause immoral actions to your surrounding characters? Take the weakness. Think about the actions your character will take that are driven by this weakness. What decisions do they make because of this weakness? Do these decisions or actions hurt other characters? If not, think of ways to flesh out the weakness to show the immoral consequences of having such a weakness. Consider your opponent. In what ways does the opponent attack the weakness of your character? For example, Sarah, in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, is very good at manipulating Peter because his love for her is driven from his lack of self-respect, which is why she attempts to manipulate him back to her. You also need to realize that your main character must overcome his weakness through the conflict with the opponent in your story. What actions do your character take to redeem his previous choices? Also, don't have your main character know what needs to change about him or her right from the beginning. Allow for this to be through self-discovery. Allow your character to feel like things are fine the way they are at the beginning, not realizing that the character has this weakness. Lastly, remember not to state the weaknesses or the lesson learned in the story outright. Do not be obvious with this. Consider the phrase show don't tell here. Otherwise, your story will feel like it is a lecture to the reader, and it will come off as childish.